to transgressions of India's borders, and India and China had a war. But since then, many lessons have now been learned, especially after Galwan 2020. So there has been a decision to disengage from Depsang and Demchok. But this is just disengagement. It's not yet de-escalation, and it's still not de-induction, and that still is a far cry. The big question, can India trust China? Or do we remain at a stage that you don't trust China, but you verify every step on ground? Over the course of the next half hour, we get you all details of what transpired between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping, the venue Kazan, the host, the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin. We have domain experts, but first, as always, our top story.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping hold their first bilateral meeting in nearly 5 years. The meeting that took place on the sidelines of the Brics Summit in Russia marks a significant thaw in the ties between the countries that plummeted after the violent clashes in Galwan Valley in 2020.
भारत और चीन के संबंधों का महत्व केवल हमारे लोगों के लिए ही नहीं, लेकिन वैश्विक शांति, स्थिरता और प्रगति के लिए भी हमारे संबंध बहुत अहम है.
Welcoming the recent agreement on patrolling along the line of actual control, Prime Minister Modi emphasized the importance of managing differences without disturbing peace.
सीमा पर शांति और स्थिरता बनाए रखना हमारी प्राथमिकता रहनी चाहिए. म्यूचुअल ट्रस्ट, म्यूचुअल रिस्पेक्ट और म्यूचुअल सेंसिटिविटी हमारे संबंधों का आधार बने रहना चाहिए.
President Xi called for enhanced communication and cooperation between India and China, highlighting their roles as major developing nations and members of the Global South.
It's important for both sides to have more communication and cooperation, properly handle our differences and disagreements, and to facilitate each other's pursuit of development aspirations. It's also important for both sides to shoulder our international responsibility, set an example for boosting the strength and unity of the developing countries.
Later, the MEA announced that the special representatives of the two countries will renew talks that have been in deep freeze since 2019.
A special representative of India, Mr. Ajit Doval, who is also the National Security Advisor, and the special representative of the People's Republic of China, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, also a member of the Politburo, have met on the sidelines of international events. So following today's meeting, we hope to schedule the next round of the SR's talks at an appropriate date.
The meeting in Kazan marks a significant step in mending ties, especially since no bilateral discussions on trade, economics and other issues have occurred in the last 5 years. During the period, the two leaders only had brief interactions at the G20 summit in Indonesia in November 2022 and the Brics Summit in South Africa in August 2023.
So there was a smile, there was a handshake, but there wasn't a hug. And this shows that there is still no meeting of the minds between India and China. And it will take some time for India to start trusting China once again. For China needs to work a lot more to build that trust. And once again, a new beginning is being made. But here, it's first verify and then trust. Gaurav Sawant in Kazan, Russia for India Today. So no doubt there is a massive trust deficit between India and China, and it's because of China's actions on ground. But what does this meeting and how does this meeting translate into the situation easing on ground, if at all? And I put that question to India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri after that conversation that between the Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President. Listen in to his response. Sir, my name is Gaurav Sawant. I work for India Today and Aaj Tak. Sir, my question is, how will this meeting lead to easing of situation along the LAC? Is there need for new confidence building measures? Will there be new confidence building measures? And will soldiers spend the fifth year at the LAC in this freezing winters? The additional 50,000 odd troops on either side.
Gaurav, insofar as your question is concerned, it is certainly our expectation that as a result of not only the agreement that was arrived at just a couple of days ago between Indian and Chinese diplomatic and military negotiators, but also as a result of the endorsement of that agreement at the highest leader level possible between the two countries, as happened in the meeting today, where both Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping welcomed the efforts that were made by Indian and Chinese negotiators and the results that were achieved by that. I think these should certainly lead to an easing of the situation along the LAC. Insofar as your question related to confidence building measures is concerned, we have a number of confidence building measures, and these evolve continuously as the two sides engage once again in multiple formats. This is certainly a subject that I think will be under discussion between the two sides. Your last question about whether soldiers will be at the LAC for the fifth year, I would defer this question to our military leadership, because this relates to operational matters, and I think it would be best that we let our military leaders dwell on this particular issue.
We heard the Prime Minister in the past couple of days. We've heard the External Affairs Minister. We've heard the Foreign Secretary. But how does this translate into action on ground, and what's the current situation? I have the finest panel joining us here on India Today. I have Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, who's commanded the Leh-based 14 Corps, the Final and Fury Corps, who joins us on this broadcast. There was a standoff, incidentally, when he was the Corps commander in 2013, if I remember the year correctly. Also with me is Ambassador Veena Sikri, somebody who keeps a hawk eye on all developments along the line of actual control, and of course LOC also. I first want to quickly cut across to India Today's Shivani Sharma, my colleague who joins us from the freezing Pangong Tso Lake at an altitude of over 14,000 feet in eastern Ladakh, and that's where the standoff actually started and escalated to Galwan. Shivani, what's the current situation, and on ground when you talk to soldiers, what are their expectations from the summit or this bilateral between the Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President?
See, Gaurav, India is quite hopeful about this development, that the agreement has been met for the resolution of patrolling to the initial points that existed before 2020. But Indian Army wants to be very cautious. We already heard Chief of Army Staff General Upen Dwivedi on this, and he said that we need to build the trust once again, and we will be watching how PLA goes about it, and we have to ensure that the buffer zones are not breached by the PLA. So that was his concern, and he also said that this would be in a phased manner. It's not going to happen immediately. So India is all up with its guards at the line of actual control, as it has been since last 4 years, and it's prepared for the fifth winter haul in this freezing cold, where the winter has already set in with minus 11 degrees here itself, where we are standing right now, Gaurav. So India is hopeful but cautious, and it will go about in a phased manner regarding this disengagement that the Foreign Secretary was also mentioning.
Stay with me for a moment, and I want to quickly bring in General Rakesh Sharma into this conversation. General Sharma, the External Affairs Minister said the situation now on ground is as on in the summer of 2020 before Pangong Tso and Galwan. Your appreciation, since you've commanded an entire corps on ground and you've also seen through a standoff that Indian Army had with the Chinese in eastern Ladakh, your appreciation of what's happened today?
Thank you, Gaurav, for inviting me. I'm sure you're enjoying next to the Volga River. The other part of the issue is that it's a very great positive development what's happened in the thaw that has come across after 4.5 years of very tense times here. But having said that, and discounting all information that has been branded about by various sources and which the media personalities are giving out, I am not counting that in. I think the agreement is only bare bones as yet, and we do not know exactly what's happening and what's going to happen. So taking the 4 statements that have been given by the Foreign Secretary twice, and then the Foreign Minister and the Chief of Army Staff, and also the small bland statement given by the representative of the MOFA in China, it's absolutely clear that there is a long haul ahead to actually devise out how things will happen on ground. There may be a disengagement at the 2 points where disengagement has not been carried out, but then beyond that, patrolling, how it will take place and what modalities will be worked out is difficult to ascertain today. And I must also say that the previous protocols and previous CBMs that were arrived at with great amount of pain and application over 20 years had actually failed. So you can't bank on those protocols and agreements which were from 93 to 2013. There has to be a new modalities to be worked out, and today at this juncture it's very difficult to say how these things will come up. And I'll end by saying that trust, I won't even say that it is difficult to be achieved, and it may be very difficult to be achieved for quite some time.
No, feel free to say it's impossible to achieve. The number of times we've been stabbed by China in the back, let's be very clear and call a spade, as you're well known to do. But Ambassador Sikri, if I were to take our viewers back to the disengagement that took place in Doklam after 2017 standoff, and that was because China was desperate for Prime Minister Narendra Modi to come to Xiamen for the Brics Summit there. So that time China disengaged, but subsequently China built up military infrastructure in a very big way near the Tri-Junction. Now, how are we to view the conversation around disengagement today? You heard the Chinese side, you heard the Indian side, and you know the situation on ground. 1, the trust factor. 2, the deceit that comes from China. They may disengage, but then they'll continue to build up.
Yes, this has been a matter of great worry. You're quite right. The last 10 years have seen a tremendous roller coaster ride in the nature of relations between India and China, beginning with 2014, when President Xi Jinping was in Ahmedabad, in Gujarat. Then we go to Doklam, and then we try, there's terrible nadir there. And then we try to build up again through the Wuhan Informal Summit, through the Mahabalipuram Informal Summit. But then comes, then 2019, they have their long meeting. And then you have Galwan in 2020. So obviously it has been a tremendous roller coaster ride. We have tried always to build back. But this time there is a build back again. We have come again to the stage of a build back. We have come to the stage where we have got a patrolling, a disengagement scheme, a resumption of patrolling. But I think we will take it very slowly to see that these things are actually implemented. In fact, even the Chinese Foreign Office statement on the decisions of the two sides said that we look forward to implementing the resolutions. So obviously in the implementation there will probably be some delay, some misunderstandings. So we have to be very patient on that. And in the meanwhile, because the special representatives are going to resume their talks, so one hopes.
Okay. So engagement is always a very positive thing, even if it's taking place after a gap of 5 years. But General Sharma, you understand the lay of the land. Let's, when the External Affairs Minister of the country says the situation is now back to pre-April-May 2020, does that indicate that Indian Army patrol will now not be stopped at bottleneck and can go up to points that are being indicated, 10, 11 Alpha, 12, 12A and 13 when it comes to the Depsang plains, and the Chinese would be able to come up to perhaps a kilometer short of Butse? Is that what the pre-2020 scenario was?
So Gaurav, the External Affairs Minister said this in the India Today conclave, in the NDTV conclave, and we must take it that the External Affairs Minister has spoken in wisdom and he knows better than we do so. But just now when you asked Shivani a question, Shivani referred to buffer zones again. So buffer zones didn't exist in 2020. If the buffer zones,
Yes.
and which is also referred to by the Chief of Army Staff in his talk yesterday in USI. So, it gives an impression that the buffer zones will remain, which means that the infringement and the tensions of the buffer zones will not going anywhere. So that is one part, and I'm just taking it at face value of
So
what is
give me
being
a
stated
moment.
here.
Give me a moment, and I put that very specific question. General, give me a moment. General, give me a moment. My question to you, as of now, is very specific about Depsang. The current disengagement conversation, and I put this question to the Foreign Secretary, and I've repeatedly asked the Minister of External Affairs. The current round of engagement on disengagement was only on Depsang and Demchok. The buffer zones or something that was decided earlier remains the way they are as of now. That is what the government is very clear about. So my question, very specific for the moment, General, is about Depsang, sir.
So if we are not allowed to patrol to patrolling point 13, that is on the plateau, then the agreement is not substantive. I will put it this way, because that's the only way that
Fair
today,
enough.
because the only way that we can go to the plateau, there is no other way that we can reach the Aksai or the Depsang plateau. All the other places, the buffer zones have been created. So you as it is can't patrol to those areas. So only one way left out to patrol to Depsang is through Rakhi Nala and through the bottleneck and Bai Junction, and you split across to 9 and 13, and then you match up again. So if that is being achieved, well, of course, we got a great step forward into patrolling there. Now, the Chinese on their own part will also come down to Butse, which is very close to our post, ITBP post, and on close to the road that goes to DBO. And that will be an anxiety. So we'll have to pursue as how Chinese are doing. So it is quid pro quo. And also, there was a reference to Arunachal Pradesh in their discussion yesterday. Now, see, those are intangible issues. What's now spoken about Arunachal Pradesh and what will the give and take? Because one newspaper carried an article of the Chinese seeking something in the Arunachal Pradesh some weeks
No,
ago. So
on India First, I'm not going on what newspapers may speculate, sir. We are going very strictly on facts because, in India today, we have access to decision makers and we have access to what has been achieved. And that is why viewers watch India Today, because on India First, we are very specifically talking about Depsang and Demchok, because this round of conversation and disengagement was very specific only to Depsang and Demchok and not about decisions that had been taken earlier in 2022 about other buffer zones. All of that remains the way it is. That status quo remains, and I have it on authority from people here in Kazan. But I want to bring in Ambassador Veena Sikri. Would this be seen as a step forward in case Indian Army once again now has access to those petrol points like they did pre-2020 in Depsang and Demchok, and grazers have access to traditional grazing grounds? Is that an achievement? Tactical, but a step forward, and then we can talk about whether this can be built on removal of buffer zones at Gogra, Hot Spring, Pengong So, and north and south bank of Pengong So, ma'am.
No, I agree. I fully agree with you that the first focus has to be on achieving at Depsang and Demchok the patrolling, the graziers, the shepherds going and getting back to the situation that it was there pre-2020. So that is the target. And External Affairs Minister has said that more than once, that this is our target. We have to achieve it before the normalization of relations anywhere else. Certainly, if this is achieved, that is the first test of trust. The first verification of the trust is this. And then once this is achieved, simultaneously, the SR special representatives will be getting together to talk about any other questions we may have about buffer zones or any other issues about the border that may be there. But these two, I think, are the first preconditions. These have to be implemented because the meeting has taken place between our Prime Minister and President Xi Jinping based on this agreement, based on the Chinese agreeing that yes, on Depsang and Demchok,
Okay.
Go back to the pre-2020. That is the first test. If they don't pass that test, I don't think we can go anywhere else.
So there's an agreement on paper. How is that implemented on ground? We'll track that story very closely. And we have the best domain experts like General Sharma who've served on ground, who know the lay of the land, not just on the 8-grid map, but also on ground. So we know, what's the factual situation. And General, the last standoff when that India had, you were commanding that corps. Has India's response to China over these past years been very different from in the past years? Especially post Galwan 2020, has India stuck to our guns, insisted we have it our way, or it's the highway?
So I think from 2020 onwards, what has happened is actually transformative. Not only in Eastern Ladakh, but all along the borders, we know exactly what has happened. We have established habitat, which is the best quality habitat for people to stay as close the LAC in that altitudes, and also we have established the infrastructure to sustain them, and we have stood to our guns, and I think we have learned the hard way, as you rightly say. I have a point, two small issues. One is Demchok we have referred. What exactly about Demchok is we don't know as yet, because Demchok is there is a Nala, there is a CNN junction, there is a pass. So what exactly has been arrived at, or what exactly will be arrived at on Demchok is not known. So that's one issue here. And second is that, someday we'll have to start talking. I'm not talking de-escalation, or I'm not talking de-induction, but I'm saying, please tell us what is your line of actual control. We don't even know the Chinese line. I mean, are we still sticking to 1959 line, or we are still talking about perceptions of LAC of the Chinese? We'd say, okay, finally we are having shaking hands. There is a defreeze. Please tell us this point, this
Fair
point,
enough.
this point, this point is the line.
And that China just doesn't want to do, because they want to keep us in a state of flux. They want to gain from our economy, they want to gain from our markets, but they want to keep us on stand too, or nervous along the borders. And that clearly is unlikely to happen, as we've seen post-2020, and we'll be tracking that story very, very closely. General Sharma and Ambassador Sikri for joining me here on this India Today special broadcast from Kazan in Russia. Many thanks. That is all I have for you on this broadcast. Many thanks for watching. News and updates continue on India Today. Stay with us.
जाओगी कैसे?
हेलो, मैं आ रहा हूँ। भगा कर ले जाऊंगा।
सिक्योरिटी! भाग गए, पकड़ो उनको! हेलो!
बोला था ना, भगा कर ले जाऊंगा।
एक हिंट तो देते?
हिंट?
बड़े आराम से।
Motorola Razr 50 Ultra comes with Google Gemini. Motorola Razr 50 Ultra comes with Google Gemini.
Hi, I am AI anchor Sana, bringing the top headlines for you, presented by Motorola. JMM releases second list of candidates for Jharkhand elections. Rajya Sabha MP Mahua Maji gets ticket from Ranchi against BJP's CP Singh. Priyanka Gandhi signs nomination papers for Wayanad by-poll after mega roadshow. Supreme Court reprimands Punjab and Haryana government over rising air pollution in Delhi. Questions raised on measures to stop stubble burning.
ब्रिक्स $30 ट्रिलियन से भी ज्यादा बड़ी इकोनॉमी है। हमारे आर्थिक सहयोग को बढ़ाने में